Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Before we get to the formal part of the meeting, I would like to pay a tribute to Julie Files, one of our committee clerks, who sadly passed away a few days ago. Julie was a well-loved member of our staff and will be sorely missed, and therefore I'd like to ask everyone to just give a minute's silence to show our respect for Julie and give our thoughts to her family. So we'll just have a minute's silence if that's okay with everyone. Right, thank you everyone for that. So now we'll get down to the formal business. Item 1 is apologies. Amanda, have you any apologies?
I've not received any apologies, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. So items 2 and 3 are the roll call and asking members to declare any interests. So I'll go through the list and ask people to confirm they're here. So we start with Councillor Gwilym Butler.
In attendance, Chair, no pecuniary interests.
Councillor Lee Chapman.
Present, Leader, and no pecuniary interests.
Councillor Steve Charmley.
Present, Leader, no pecuniary interest.
Councillor Dean Carroll.
Present, Leader, no pecuniary interests.
Councillor Steve Davenport.
Present, Leader, no pecuniary interests.
Councillor Rob Macy.
Present, Leader, no pecuniary interests.
Councillor David Minery.
Present, Leader, no pecuniary interests.
Councillor Leslie Picton.
Present, Leader, no pecuniary interest.
Councillor Ed Potter.
Present and no pecuniary interests.
Next on the list of the group leaders, Councillor Alan Mosley. No, right. I don't know whether Pauline D will be here. She's quite poorly. Pauline, are you around? No, and Councillor Roger Evans.
Present, no pecuniary interest.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of members who've asked to speak, so I'll just ask them the same. Councillor David Vasmer.
Present, no interest to declare.
And Councillor David Turner. No, and Councillor Michael Wood. No. There are a list of officers in attendance. I won't ask them to confirm their attendance, but they will be Mark Barrow, Andy Begley, Karen Bradshaw, Tanya Miles, James Walton, Claire Porter and Amanda Hollyoak, who's the committee officer. So we move on to item 3, which are the minutes. And they're the minutes of the 18th of January. They've been circulated, so I'm going to ask if I can accept these minutes as a true record. I'll move that, and I'm going to ask Councillor Steve Charmley to second it.
Yeah, happy to second those, Leader.
So I'll just give everyone a few seconds, but unless there's any queries, those will be accepted. So I'll just give you a few seconds. Right, there doesn't seem to be any queries, so those are accepted as a true record. So we now move on to item 4, which are public questions. And the first question on my list is from Mr. John Newsom. Claire, refer to Claire Porter, the legal officer. Claire, are you going to read them out?
Yes, Leader, I shall read the public questions for you.
Right.
So from Mr. John Newson, and his question is about the Regulation 19 pre-submission draft local plan. And he asked, the proposal for site WBR010 in the Regulation 19 pre-submission draft local plan does not take into account the previous planning appeal refusal, which was upheld by the planning inspector. The previously refused development site is included within WBR010, and the reasons given by the planning inspector have a bearing. It is not documented at stage 3 of the site assessment for WBR010 that this previous upheld refusal and decision by the planning inspector has been taken into account. What is the reason for the previous decision of the planning inspector not to be a factor at the stage 3 site assessment? Within the process of stage 3 site assessment of WBR 007, 008 and 010, there is no facility for these to be considered together. Taken together, these sites would represent approximately a 50% increase in the number of dwellings within Worthing. It would seem reasonable that such a significant change to the community should be assessed and part of the appraisal. What is the reason for these sites' joint impact not to be considered? Both these points have been previously brought to the attention of the council. However, there has been no explanation offered, just a restatement that a process was followed. I would urge that the specific issues raised should be addressed so that the rationale for not considering these issues can be understood. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to ask Councillor Rob Macy to respond. Rob?
Thank you, Leader. The site assessment process captured within the overall sustainability appraisal has provided evidence to inform the draft local plan proposed site allocations. For each site, this has included an assessment of a site's potential impact on a number of factors, from flood risk, landscape, highways, heritage, ecology, trees and public protection. Officers have then provided a planning balance judgment taking these issues into account in arriving at the preferred site allocations for the new emerging local plan covering the period 2016 to 2038. Having considered the outcomes of the site assessment process and assessed this option against other reasonable site alternatives, which are all documented in the site assessment process, site WBR 010 lands south of the B4 386 is proposed for inclusion within the emerging local plan for a development of around 20 dwellings. This proposal is currently subject to the statutory consultation at Regulation 19 stage. To this end, officers have not dismissed previous views on the site expressed by other parties, including individual planning inspectors. But it should be noted that the previous inspectorate decision referred to was taken within the context of the currently adopted local plan and not against the development needs of the emerging local plan. The Regulation 19 consultation has recently been extended by 3 weeks to take account of added lockdown restrictions and now closes on the 26th of February. It is considered that if individuals or organisations wish to raise an objection to the emerging local plan, this current consultation represents the best mechanism to express those views. All comments which are made to the current Regulation 19 consultation will be sent to an independently appointed planning inspector along with the council's evidence when the council submits the plan for examination later in 2021. We therefore encourage everybody who wishes to have their say on the current proposals to make their views heard through the Regulation 19 consultation process. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Rob. Right, we move on to question 2, which is from David Kilby. So I'm going to ask Claire Porter to read the question. Claire?
Thank you. Yes, this is about Shropshire Council Leisure Services. Can Shropshire Council confirm that during the period 2012 to 2013, they signed a contract with Shropshire Leisure Community Trust Limited to provide leisure services across the Shropshire area up until 2022? Can Shropshire Council confirm that at the time of signing the contract, they were fully satisfied that the Leisure Trust was a properly democratically constituted trust, and that in their opinion, they were satisfied that the governance of the Leisure Trust was entirely fit for the purpose of providing leisure services as agreed to deliver the aforementioned contract? Could the Council also confirm that as of the 4th of February 2021, they are fully satisfied that the Leisure Trust currently meets the required governance Tier 3 level standards as set out in Sport England and UK Sports Governance Guidance documents, a precondition of being able to attract additional grants for future sports provision at any one of the 5 facilities they are contracted to run, that is the Quarry Pool, Sundawn Sports Village, Oswestry Leisure Centre, Whitchurch Swimming Pool and Market Drayton Leisure Centre. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to ask Councillor Leslie Picton to respond. Leslie?
Thank you, Leader. I can confirm that Shropshire Council signed a contract with the Shropshire Community Leisure Trust in 2012-2013 to provide leisure services at the following facilities: the Quarry Swimming and Fitness Centre, Shrewsbury Sports Village, Oswestry Leisure Centre, Market Drayton Swimming Centre and Whitchurch Swimming Centre. The council entered into the contract with Shropshire Community Leisure Trust after carrying out an evaluation of their governance model and satisfying itself that it was properly constituted as an industrial and provident society, now a registered society, registered with the Financial Services Authority, which is the regulator for such societies, and accepted by Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs as having charitable status. The contract was let after a formal competitive tendering process. The council evaluated the delivery model as part of the formal evaluation process set out in the invitation to tender. Based on this, the council was satisfied that the tender by Serco Leisure Limited, which provided for Shropshire Community Leisure Trust to be the contractor, was the preferred tender. And the position as of the 4th of February 2021 is that the council have held discussions with Shropshire Community Leisure Trust over several months regarding governance and working towards Tier 3 level standards. It is agreed by both parties that those standards are not currently in place and an independent review of the existing governance should be undertaken by the Trust. This process has been agreed by the Trust Board and will take place. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Leslie. We move now to question 3, which is from Mr. Nick Saxby, and I'm going to again ask Claire Porter to read out the question. Claire.
Thank you, Leader. Just to make it clear to Cabinet that there is some preamble from Mr. Saxby, and I understand some photographs which have been sent to Cabinet members already. The questions are: will the Council review the impact of the maintenance of the Whitchurch bypass? What options are available to prevent lorry drivers or anyone else from leaving offensive waste around Whitchurch? Will the Council commit to taking proactive steps and work on long-term solutions to littering and offensive waste dumping on the bypass? Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to ask Councillor Steve Davenport to respond. Steve.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Saxby. The council, via the street scene team, are bringing forward an improved programme of litter picking on high-speed roads. It is true that there have been issues with covering staff, absences, staff redirected to deal with floods, cleanups, etc., winter maintenance, and it is recognised that the improvements needs to be made and additional work will need to be instigated over the next few weeks. Opportunistic littering is a national problem, and local authorities have been seen the increase during COVID-19 period. The council would certainly look into the issues both in Whitchurch and other problem areas. This will be carefully considered, as many opportunistic littering is done often at night or at times when no one is about, and also places normally visited by individuals but accessible to those less desirable intentions. As said, there is clear intent to improve the programme of activity and will come forward soon as agreed with our street scene contractor. So we know this is a problem throughout the county, and I can assure you, Mr. Saxby, I am certainly involved in helping this along. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Now we move to member questions. The first one is from Councillor David Vasmer. David, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. I've been contacted recently by residents in my division whose homes have been flooded once again. I'd be grateful if you could answer the following. Will the council provide £500 cash assistance again? Will flood affected homes be able to claim a council tax break? Will the council lobby government to change regulations so that residents who received the Property Flood Resilience Grant last year can apply for it again this year? And will the council lobby the government to ensure that the resilience grant applications are speeded up? Some of last year's applications had not been agreed before they were flooded again this year.
Okay, thank you, David. I'm going to ask Councillor Steve Davenport to respond. Steve.
Right, okay. Starting from the top, David, the £500 community recovery grant was released by the MHCLG and distributed by Shropshire Council in response to the devastating 2 weeks of significant flooding which affected the region in February 2020. Large numbers of properties in Shropshire have flooded again this year, and the council have been providing updates on flooded property numbers to the MHCLG. However, the government have not yet given the council any indication they will be the grants will be made available as of yet. A response to the flooding associated with Storm Christoph. 2. Council tax discounts in relation to floods is dependent on the government triggering flood recovery framework. This was triggered in February 2020 in relation to Storm Kira and Dennis, and enabled the council to provide 100% council tax discounts for a minimum of 3 months to affected properties, the cost of which is picked up by the government. Unless the government triggers the flood recovery framework, there is nothing the council regulations to specifically provide council tax discounts for these floods. So again, we are waiting to hear from the government. 3. As with Community Recovery Grant, PFR grant is also funded by the MHCLG, managed by DEFRA and delivered by Shropshire Council. The eligibility criteria of the properties to access the funding set by DEFRA, and they are extremely rigid on how this is applied. Shropshire Council have been challenged. The Shropshire Council have challenged the criteria on several occasions. However, this has not been successful. See below the lobbying for the government. So I can actually send you the lobbying that's been done on that day along this, David. Number 4, there have been significant issues with grant process, which has affected the rollout not only in Shropshire but across the entire River Severn catchment. Guidance from DEFRA on delivery of the scheme was delayed until April 2020, over 2 months after the flooding. And when the guidance was provided, there were inaccuracies in the document which delayed the rollout further. On receipt of the updated guidance, Shropshire Council was required to establish a detailed process for distributing the funding with no additional resources provision from DEFRA. This also took a significant amount of time to arrange, which was further hampered by the COVID lockdown. In addition to the national availability of huge demand of suitably qualified survey compliance from the PFR manufacturers, along with the products and that may be relevant quality assurance standards, has meant that many residents have been able to progress applications at this stage. Where they are suitable for pavement, Shropshire Council, it should be noted that residents in the areas of known flooding risk should not rely entirely on the PFR grant to protect their own property, and should consider options available to them to mitigate the impact. Shropshire Council are working to process the applications as quickly as possible. However, many of the delays to date have been outside our control. The last one, lobbying government. As stated below, the delivery of the PFR grant by Shropshire Council has been extremely difficult due to the poor guidance provided by DEFRA and limited availability of accredited PFR manufacturers available to residents. This issue has been affected by the councils across the entire country, and although concerns have been raised to DEFRA, no changes to either the eligibility criteria or guidance have been forthcoming. Shropshire Council will therefore work with the National Flood Forum and local authorities to request further review and current arrangements to deliver this PFR grant. And just for me to add at the bottom, I'm constantly talking to our officers on this, and who's doing a very good job in lobbying the government. Thank you.
Peter, could I just ask? Could I just ask supplementary? Thank you very much. For Steve, thank you very much for that response. And yes, I would like details I think you outlined of lobbying that's been going on. And just to say that, yeah, I hope that you can lobby very strongly on this one, because I think it affects a lot of people. And lastly, I'd just like to say that on the role of to speak to them, and also for people who who have applied for a grant and have not received one with their application, but would they be able to make amends to that application, for example, where they're being flooded a second time and even further damage done?
Well, David, I think the best thing to do is have those people write into the council and or to me, and I will pass this on. That's the last point. But the other point is be assured that I lobby government myself constantly on various issues across my portfolio and will not stop. So please, if you want to speak to me outside this meeting, please do.
Okay, right. Question 2 is from Councillor Roger Evans. Roger.
Thank you, Leader. I'll read my question out. And Roger Evans, Councillor for the Longdon Division. Council have received a number of grants from government to help businesses during this pandemic, to help and assist them to follow their guidance and to close, thus reducing the chances of them spreading this dreadful virus. I have had a query from a business who grooms dogs. They have closed as advised by government to help prevent the spread of COVID. Advice sought by the proprietor from Shropshire Council echoes that received from both government and their professional organisation that they belong to. And that is, they should only deal with animals by appointment where this is necessary for the animal's welfare. The advice from Shropshire Council is that though the legislation doesn't prevent them from opening, the guidance does. The business is therefore effectively closed. It's my understanding that over 70 local authorities, including those local to Shropshire, have agreed similar businesses are considered as closed and are therefore paying out the appropriate grant. Those businesses are now in receipt of grant monies the government have made available to councils to distribute. Why and for what reason have Shropshire interpreted this advice differently to many others and to refuse applications similar to this, therefore taking a very different view to over 70 other authorities who are giving out the grant? In effect, this council is saying, open, carry on, take no notice of all the advice you have been given, continue, even though others at Shropshire Council support and endorse the advice given. Everyone else seems to agree this is not a priority business and therefore should close. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Roger. I'm going to ask Councillor Steve Chalmley to respond. Steve.
Thank you, Leader. Advice was taken from regulatory services before any decision was made regarding the eligibility of businesses within this industry. The advice received was as follows. Businesses within this industry are in a similar position to the November lockdown. That is, you are not required to be closed. You can carry out your services as normal, although there is, of course, a need and expectation you will be doing so in a COVID secure way, in terms of carefully managed and socially distant handovers, contactless payments and thorough cleaning, etc. Government have outlined businesses and venues that can remain open include animal groomers, as they may continue to be used for animal welfare rather than aesthetic purposes. This includes animal grooming businesses as outlined in the question. Based on the guidance provided, we've followed government legislation that states businesses in this sector are not mandated to close, which therefore mean they are not eligible for the local restriction support grant. However, given the case was raised approximately 2 weeks ago, and we've been put in contact with dog groomers, we have since paid out through the discretionary grant scheme, which gives us more flexibility in terms of payments and legislation. So this particular case has been sorted a long time ago before this question was asked. I should add that I'm slightly disappointed that Rogers highlighted a negative fact on the grant scheme, because I need to highlight that we've paid out over £100 million in grants to over 9,000 businesses since last March, which is a pretty damn good achievement for this council. It's just a shame one case has been highlighted. Thank you, Lena.
Thank you, Steve. Roger, do you want to come back?
Yep. If the money is now being paid out, then I congratulate the council. I do congratulate the council and the staff for paying out the grants to the many businesses and the way it has been performed. It seemed that this one, up until 4 days ago, had still been told they were not eligible. But hopefully it is good news that there has been a way to actually enable them to stay closed, because the advice they have received now is different to the advice they received in November. And so that has been echoed by their professional body. So if they have received it, thank you on their behalf, and anybody else in a similar type of business who have also been able to access this extra money, which enable them to be there for everybody in the future and to maintain COVID so that we do not spread the disease more than needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I did allow you a bit of discretion there. You were supposed to
understand. I understand.
Right. Okay. Right. Moving on. Item 6 is scrutiny items, but I think there aren't any scrutiny items today. So we move to item 7, which is special guardianship allowances policy. And I'm going to invite Councillor Ed Potter to explain the purpose of the item. Ed.
Thank you very much, Leader. This paper seeks Cabinet approval for a revised payment policy for the remuneration of special guardians. The report sets out at 1.5 what special guardians are, but in short are family or connected persons who agree to care for children who have been in the care of the local authority. Special guardianship orders are important for carers and children. It means that children can live in a long-term basis with people who are not their parents, but who are related or otherwise known to them. Importantly, once a special guardianship order has been granted, they are no longer classed as looked after children, and the need for the level of social work input is reduced. This policy supports our strategy to reduce the number of children looked after by the council, and in ensuring that children can, wherever possible, live with a family. The revised policy brings in line remuneration payments for special guardianship orders with that of foster carers, so that SGOs are not financially disadvantaged and that it is an agreeable option for them to care for these children on a long-term basis. In short, I commend this policy as it is good for children so they can remain in long-term care of somebody that they are acquainted with. If this was not the case, and the risk to the children being placed outside the family or with foster carers or into residential provision. This is positive for carers, as they are equitably financially compensated for caring for children for whom they are not the parent. This is positive for the council, as it ensures that children can be cared for by somebody they know, and by agreeing to this policy, it reduces the potential for legal action and further financial impact. It also means that we are completely compliant with the law. Therefore, I'd ask members of Cabinet to support this and the recommendations, and we can move forward to ensure that children in Shropshire are cared for in loving family situations to the best of our ability and those of connected carers. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ed. I'll second the report, and I'll reserve my right to speak. I've got a question from Councillor Dean Carroll. First, Dean.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you very much, Ed. This is a really good report and it's very well written, so congratulations to you and your officers on that. My question is, how many children does this currently apply to? How many do we have who are currently subject to special guardianship orders?
Currently, as it stands, there are 121 children currently being supported in Shropshire with a special guardianship order.
Thank you, Ed. And then I've got another question from Councillor Leslie Picton. Leslie.
Thanks, Ed. I was really pleased to see this report come forward today. Can you just tell me, because it's been a while since I've looked at this, what support is available for children who are subject to these special guardianship orders? Because I remember there were some other things around as well.
Yes, well, obviously, under a special guardianship order, there's less input, as I mentioned, from social care from social workers. However, there is a range of support services available for children who are subject to special guardianship orders. Special guardians are entitled to request an assessment of need throughout the duration of the order. This ensures that the children's support, as children's support changes and as it develops, the appropriate response is there. Annual reviews of support and assessments are completed by the special guardianship support social worker, who is able to offer advice, guidance and assess to appropriate support services if needs be. For children who have been previously looked after by the local authority, funding is available through pupil premium to support them in education, and the adoption support fund is there to enable a range of therapeutic support services should they be needed.
Okay, thank you, Ed. I can't see anybody else indicating to speak. I think it's a pretty straightforward report. I think it's an excellent report, and I think it's the right thing for the council to be doing. We do want to look after our carers as much as possible. So, Ed, I don't know if you have any further comments?
No, Leader, I'm all good there, thank you.
Right, so there are recommendations, and unless I hear differently in the next few seconds, I'm going to assume that they are accepted by Cabinet. So I'll give you a few seconds if anybody wishes to say anything. No, so those recommendations are accepted by Cabinet and will become part of our policy. Right, moving on. Item 8, determination of admission arrangements 2022-2023. Councillor Ed Potter again.
Thank you, Leader. This paper, members of Cabinet will recall, comes before Cabinet annually, and in accordance with the Schools Admissions Code, consultation for 2022-2023 must be completed by the 31st of January of this year, which it has been, and arrangements must be determined before the 28th of February 2021, hence it being brought to this Cabinet meeting today. In short, there are very minor changes to the admissions policy. For example, the minor changes relate to the designated catchment area for the New Bowbrook Primary School, and the other only proposed changes to the Shropshire Council's administration arrangements for 2022-2023 is a change to the published administration number, or the PAN, for Stipestone C.V. Primary School, which is now co-located with Norbury Primary School. Governors proposed a reduction in the PAN from 8 to 7 to ensure that the numbers in Key Stage 1 remain within the infant class size legislation. The proposal was initiated by the Governors, and Shropshire Council is the administration authority for the school, but the local authority is in agreement with this proposal. Consultation on this was carried out between Friday the 11th of December and Monday the 25th of January, and the local admissions forum met on the 28th of January and has recommended the proposed arrangements. Therefore, I request that Cabinet approve the change to the Council's admission arrangements for 2022-2023 academic year, and the recommendations are at 2.1 in the paper. Thank you.
Okay, I will second that report. Nobody has asked a question or wishes to speak, so again I'll give a few moments for anybody to indicate. Other than that, we will accept the recommendations in the report. There's no comment, so the recommendations are accepted and will be introduced. Right, we move on to item 9, which is the financial strategy 2021-22 to 2025-2026. And in a minute, I'm going to ask Councillor David Minery to introduce the item, but I do want to make a statement about this before I invite him to do so. In the financial strategy, the assumption made by officers is for a 4.99% council tax increase. This is based on a general 1.99% increase and a social care precept of 3%. The government have provided us with a provision that we can defer some of the social care precept for a year. This is helpful because instead of losing that council tax revenue forever, it means we don't have to take all the income increase now, and instead we can come back and have another look at it in a year's time. So while the officers have assumed 3% precept in 21-22, we could instead agree a 2% precept in 21-22 and take a further 1% in 22-23, providing with the same overall resources in the long term. Now, I understand why officers had planned for an overall 4.99% increase, but I also need to think about the people who have to pay it after such a difficult year. If we agree a 3.99% council tax increase in 2021, I believe that would remove about £1.6 million from next year's budget. I can ask officers to go and find additional savings to pay for this, but those are going to take a little time to work up. For now, we could pay this by utilising more of the financial strategy reserve. The commitments against this reserve have come down a bit since the Cabinet last saw the report in December, so the change to a 3.9% council tax increase can be afforded for now from there. On that basis, I will be asking officers to review their plans and bring back to Council on February the 25th a revised financial strategy based on a 3.99% council tax increase, with the shortfall funding initially from reserves. Now, I might need to just get some help with the exact wording of how we incorporate that into any recommendations, but I think what I'm saying is pretty clear. So I'm going to now ask Councillor David Minery to introduce this report. David.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I hear what you just say right at the end of that about asking for advice, and I think before I proceed, it would be useful to know if that change that you are suggesting requires any of these recommendations to be changed. So perhaps the section 151 officer could just come in and briefly tell us if we need to change any of the wordings, because at the moment they're all presupposing the higher level of increase.
Right, so I'm going to ask James Walton, the Executive Director from Finance and all sorts of other things, to just comment on that. James?
Thank you, Leader. James Walton. Yeah, in terms of the recommendations there, they're all based on the 4.99% increase. So I think what we need to do is just to add in a recommendation that just says that you would like the figures to come back for full council approval to be based on the 3.99% increase. So I haven't got the figures to amend those recommendations to. So I think if we work through those recommendations as they stand, but then finalise it with these figures that will then be revised at full council based on the request that you've made, then I think that would cover that off.
Okay, right, so that will be, do you need that to be a G in the recommendations or just a note to the recommendations?
I think it would be, we add a G to it. I think that's probably the clearest way of doing it.
Okay, right, so back to you, David.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you, James, for that. So I will formally move the recommendations A to E to F as printed, and also formally move G, which is to reconsider the figures in the light of the decision to levy a slightly lower amount of council tax, with the whole thing to then be approved at the council meeting on the 25th of this month. So that's now the recommendation. In terms of narrative, Leader, I don't know that there's an awful lot to be said here. That the report is, as always, lengthy and very detailed. The report, as amended, will come forward again in a few days' time on the 25th, and I expect at Council there will be considerable debate, as there normally is. So rather than have that debate twice, I think I'll stick with just moving the recommendations. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, David. I will second that with the inclusion of G. I've got Councillor Roger Evans wishes to speak. Roger.
Thank you, Leader. I note the late recommendation G. I won't pass any comment on that. No doubt we can have a debate on this more fully at the full council. But what I will do, I note in the report there is a reference to a 2.7 million predicted overspend at the end of this year, although that is based on the Q2 results. Q3 is just finished. I wonder if the Section 151 officer has anything that can be said about the likely overspend for this 2.7, because it does, or it could impact on what the budget for next year and the carryover and the financial strategy is left to use. But I also note that in the strategy before us today, or before you today, there's 3.85 million of new savings with very little detail. I will be asking the officer for more details of what this does mean, but I also note there is just £100,000 saving predicted from LED street lighting. This is after we, the Liberal Democrats, tried to introduce LED street lighting throughout Shropshire a number of years ago, and I note that there's £1.3 million there in inflation due to energy and petrol costs. That inflation and that increase would not be there if the council had adopted what the Liberal Democrats proposed a number of years ago. Thank you, Speaker. That's all I'll make a comment on at this time on this, although I'm disappointed at this and what it contains, but more later.
Leader David Minry here. I can actually deal with the first part of the question if you wish, about the 2.7 million forecast overspend at the end of month 6.
Yeah, you carry on. Yeah.
It's a very brief comment. Yes, you're quite right, Councillor Evans. Q3 has now finished, and provisional look at the figures suggests that the situation now has improved considerably. I'm not yet going to stick my neck out and say what it's going to be, but it's looking as though the full year deficit will be considerably less than the 2.7 million that we were looking at the half year stage. As far as the savings are concerned, there is a brief, just in case anybody hasn't been able to wade through all of the papers. There are a lot. Page 36 of the report, of the pack, I think it is, and page 32 is the page of in the report itself. There is actually table 4, new savings 21-22, and there is a list of those there where which service they affect, and the total of 3.85 million. But certainly I'm sure we can provide even more information for Councillor Evans in advance of the council meeting, should that be necessary. Thank you.
My only comment would be, every year the first quarter seems awful, the second quarter seems less awful, and as we go through the year we get far nearer to getting our budget back in balance, and I suspect it'll be the same this year, although it has been an incredibly difficult year with the pandemic, and even now we're still working through figures to try and understand exactly where we are, and I wouldn't like to predict whether we'll hit the right target or we'll be slightly out. You know, it's such a difficult year to really know where we are, and it may be several months before it all becomes exactly clear, but we will always do our best for the people of Shropshire, as we have been doing, and we will continue to do so. Now, I don't know whether you wanted to comment, James, or not, or you're happy to leave it as it is. No, James is indicating he doesn't wish to comment, so I think there is going to be a full debate, I'm sure, at council over this, so we don't really need to say too much. I don't accept exactly what you're saying about energy savings. I think you're mixing up various things into one sentence, which I think is wrong. But anyway, we can have that debate at council. So it's moved and it's seconded, the financial strategy and the recommendations therein. So unless anybody indicates they wish to speak, I'm going to assume that that is accepted by council, so by cabinet. So I'll just give you a few seconds. No, there's no indication. So that then is accepted. The amended recommendation with the G, which is saying the officers will construct the budget for next year on the basis of a 3.99% council tax increase. OK, thank you. We move on. Item 10 is the capital strategy. I'm going to ask Councillor David Minery to introduce it, and I'm sure others will have plenty to say. So I'm just digging out my next bit of paper. So David.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, David Minery here. My pleasure to move the capital programme 2021-2 to 2023-24. Again, it's not a short report. There's a lot of detail in there, a lot of narrative, which I'm not going to go through. I'm assuming that everybody has read it. I will draw attention, though, to the Appendix B at the end. Appendix B contains a list of the various projects that are actually included, identified and costed within the budget for 21-22 and for 22-23 and for 23-24. And there's a long list. It runs to actually 3 pages, I think. And rather than me try and cherry pick items from there to talk about, I think colleagues who are responsible themselves for the various items of expenditure within those budgets might want to do that task rather than leave me to pick out the ones, because inevitably I will pick the ones that people don't find interesting and I shall skip over the ones that I think are boring. So rather than go through all that, I'll leave it to colleagues to speak to their own patch. Thank you.
OK, thank you, David. I'll second the report, and I'll reserve my right to speak. So the first person who wishes to speak is Councillor Steve Charmley. Steve.
Thank you, Leader. And as Cabinet Member for Economic Growth, it's no surprise that Appendix B is very interesting to me, especially the Oswestry HIP Fund, which is £9 million towards Mile End Roundabout. But it's actually an enabling fund which opens up 800 houses and 500 jobs on the innovation park adjacent to it. But it's not just for Oswestry. We've got Bishop's Castle there as well, for £3 million going into jobs and the economy in Bishop's Castle, which is great to see. They're obviously a fraction of the capital strategy, but essential for economic growth success across the county. Evidence that this administration is investing in growth and laying the foundations to unleash Shropshire's potential. So great to see. Good report. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Steve. Next on my list is Dean Carroll. Dean.
Thank you, Leader. And following on from what Steve said about investing in the county, there's a couple of lines in here that I'd like to draw people's attention to. And the first one is around the Paul's Moss development, the Whitchurch medical practice, which is something that's been very much needed for a great many years, as we're conscious they're now going down from 3 to 2 and now to 1 medical practice in Whitchurch. So to get the Paul's Moss scheme finally off the ground in the coming year with this capital investment, together with the CCG and Wrekin Housing, our partners, will be fantastic news for people of Whitchurch and the surrounding communities. In addition to that, coming on to the adult social care side of things, we've got Green Acres Farm, which we've got listed in here, the renovation of the farmhouse, which needs to be added to the supported living units, proposed supporting living units that were agreed by council for funding last year, which is supporting some of the most vulnerable people in Shropshire and bringing some of our most vulnerable residents back into Shropshire, back into county from placements all over the country, because we previously lacked the appropriate venues for them. So that investment is very well needed, as is the disabled facilities grants, which are always well subscribed to and support our core ambition to help people be independent in their own homes and avoid going into care homes. So we shouldn't, just because they're not a single high high profile, big ticket item, we shouldn't overlook the importance of disability facilities grants, because they genuinely do change the lives of really vulnerable people. And then coming on, it would be most unlike me to finish speaking at cabinet meeting without mentioning green issues and carbon reduction. And I would draw cabinet's attention to the unallocated commercial investments fund, because along with external grants that we're already in the process of bidding for, we will be making case-by-case applications, which we've already started to do in the first cases, for carbon reduction schemes, including the first one, as we know, will be the solar photovoltaic array, 4 megawatt array in Oswestry at Maysbury Road. And there will be other ones coming down the line, hopefully the Shrewsbury Weir Hydro scheme. Hopefully, if we can get the buy-in from our partners, hydrogen fuel production facility in Shrewsbury, battery storage facilities and other solar photovoltaic panels schemes, that we're looking at possibly up to 30 megawatts constructed and possibly even more invested in the first 18 months, in the next 18 months to 2 years. And that will make a huge contribution towards our ambition to be carbon neutral and energy self-sufficient by 2030. So I just wanted to draw Cabinet's attention to those few points, because I think that they're all really positive stories. And as the previous speaker, Councillor Chalmley, said, show that we're investing in this county and releasing the potential of the county. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Lee Chapman is next. Lee.
Thank you, Leader.
We've lost you again, Lee. Are you there?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, struggling with the mute button there. Yeah, I'd like to thank David Minnery for his report, and particularly commend some of the large chunks of money that going to be responsible for being spent in within my portfolio of transformation and digital infrastructure. Colleagues will be aware of our continued investment in technology and systems across the council, and I particularly welcome a further £1 million invested directly in those systems to improve the services that we provide and our efficiency at delivering those. And following on from Councillor Chalmley's comments about investment in our economy across Shropshire, I'm delighted to note that we are investing in excess of £7.5 million of our own capital into broadband infrastructure across the county, and that sits alongside our ongoing work lobbying government for more direct broadband investment in Shropshire. So particularly welcome those, and I'm sure colleagues and residents across Shropshire will look forward to that money being spent to best effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. I don't always understand all the technical things, but making sure we've all got a decent internet connection is going to be more and more important in Shropshire, particularly in the rural communities and agricultural communities. So we do need to keep cracking on with it, and we're making good progress. Next on my list is Councillor Roger Evans. Roger.
Thank you, Leader. The last little bit is, yep, welcome wholeheartedly the investment in broadband, because that is the way we do need to go forward. So support that. But I noted on page 29 of the pack, it says the overall revenue impact to undertake all the prioritised projects require 175 million and reaches a maximum of borrowing reaches a maximum of 9.44 million in revenue costs during the subsequent years. Does this 175 million include the Northwest Relief Road of 30 million? Anything to do with the big town plan, But I also note, unless I'm mistaken, there's nothing about electric buses and conversions of park and ride maybe to electric buses, which many residents would much prefer and improve the atmosphere and the air pollution within the town centre. So, yeah, I know what is there, but does that include those two projects? And is there any future projects for electric buses in Shrewsbury? Thank you.
I'll try and answer, but if I get it wrong, I'm sure somebody will correct me. This does not include borrowing for the North West Relief Road because that's all being done through grant funding. We are not borrowing any money to finance the North West Relief Road. It's done through direct government funding, from LEP funding, from Section 106 funding, and a small amount of SIL funding. But if I've got that wrong, I apologise, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. So we're not doing any outside borrowing for the North West Relief Road. And what was the other one you said? Buses, electric buses. There's all sorts of grants available, which we are applying for all the time. We're hoping we will be successful in some of those grant applications. But there is also a question of whether electric buses are the way forward or whether hydrogen cells are a different option that might be more easily delivered in Shropshire. So that's on the that's very much a live debate that's going on. Strangely enough, electric buses sound great, and you know the experiments we did them worked really well. But we've got an officer who had previously worked in Oxford, and Oxford is held up by the Liberals as being one of those brilliant places where everything works how they'd like it to. But we're told because electric buses are very heavy, that they're actually starting to destroy some of the highway system in Oxford, and they're having to invest lots of capital money to actually bring the roads up to date from the damage that had been done by the heavy electric buses. Now, I don't know all the details, but we've just got to make sure we understand everything that we're talking about when it comes to electric buses. So it's an item for debate as we go forward. I'm going to move on. Next on my list is Councillor Edward Potter. Ed.
Thank you, Leader. We just heard from colleagues a lot about investing in Shropshire, but the thing that stands out for me within this paper, and particularly in Appendix B, when we look at the figures and the programme, it's the investments we're going to be putting into young people within Shropshire, and in particular young people's education, in excess of well over 17 million over the next few years around our school place planning, new schools. This will also be coupled with investment from central government into the new free school SEND provision, and as well as the announcement last week from central government about the rebuilding of the Belvedere School in Shrewsbury. So that's a real positive from my point of view to see. Not only are we investing in Shropshire in infrastructure, but this is also investing in the future of Shropshire for young people to provide the best education facilities we can across the county. So that's one of the highlights for me, and I just wanted to draw that attention to members of Cabinet.
Thank you, Ed. Moving on, Councillor Leslie Picton. Leslie.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to talk about things that aren't in the report. I just didn't want anybody to think that culture and leisure hadn't been thought about as far as the capital programme goes, and I just wanted to assure people listening to this that that we will continue to invest in our leisure and culture facilities, and that the monies allocated towards the Shrewsbury swimming and the Shropshire swimming competition pool, and probably now, in all honesty, increased investment into Whitchurch leisure facilities will come online in subsequent years. So just because they're not in the report this year doesn't mean that we won't be doing them. I just didn't want people to think that we'd forgotten all about them. Thank you, Leader.
It's important to say that this report is just the fully approved schemes, and there are a load of other schemes that are in the background coming forward that might not have had the final tick in the box, but they're well advanced and are on the way. Moving on, Steve Davenport, Councillor Steve Davenport.
Yes, hi, Leader. Yes, it's great to hear from my colleagues who are investing in houses and jobs around the county. Much fantastic work and bringing people into the county to work. Alongside that is clearly connectivity, and the Northwest Relief Road, a lot of work going on now, the Pamplin bypass that has really taken some steps forward to into the union of connectivity between England and Wales. I'm really pleased to say. Electric buses, as you say, we're ongoing with not only electric but dual fuel, if you like, as you say, as they have other problems there. There is an active travel grant now that we will be feeding into both walking and cycling throughout the county. I think that's all from me now, but I just want you to know that as part of the capital strategy, I've asked for a report on future highways capital needs, and that will be coming forward. Thank you.
I think I'm right in saying, Steve, that we're also about to start work seriously on the Shifnal Highways improvement in the middle of Shifnal.
That's right. Sorry, this came to council, I think it was the last meeting, £3.5 million invested into Shifnal High Street. Work will be started late spring and go on through the summer. So that'll be a great improvement in the centre of Shifnal.
Thank you. Next on my list is David Minnery. David.
Yes, thank you, Leader. A couple of things I should have mentioned at the beginning and I didn't. And to clarify the situation with the Northwest Relief Road, it is actually in the figures, but the bulk of the money appears in 22-23, and the cost of that actually is coming in as grant from the Department for Transport. Unfortunately, it's not shown specifically as NWRR, but if anybody wants to look at the figures, they are exactly the same figures that come in the income section, and that's the bit I meant to draw attention to earlier, and I didn't. At the very end of the appendix, right at the very end of the report, it does show where the money is actually coming from, because I know people often get confused about the amount of money councils spend on capital rather than revenue, and we keep getting our ears bent about people, why are you spending all that money on so and so when you can't even afford to fill a pothole or whatever it is that they're moaning about. Well, in fact, most of the stuff is actually not coming out of the council taxpayers' pockets. The full spread is shown on that sheet, but for example, £54 million is coming from direct government grants. There's another £24 million coming from things like Section 106 payments, infrastructure levies, and so on. There is an amount of about £48 million that is going to be borrowed, and then the rest is mainly coming from capital receipts. So it's not actually, it's only the interest elements of these payments that tend to hit the general rate fund. The rest of it is coming in from grants, as I say, and money that we're raising from other areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, what we haven't mentioned, because, and I don't know if it's part of the capital strategy or where it fits in, is SIL payments. We are spending an enormous amount of money that the council have raised in SIL payments, and a lot of it is on smaller projects in parish councils and things like that. Now, I don't know whether Gwilym Butler's on the, I can't see him on my thing, but I'm sure Gwilym's not far away. Gwilym, if you'd like to just give us a word on that, that would be grateful.
Yep. That's great, Leader. Thank you. I think that the time is apt that we also thank the town and parish councils for engaging with us. And I think it goes back down to that saying, Leader, it's the small things that make the difference. And in a lot of our communities, enabling smaller infrastructure and capital projects to go forward has been great. Over the last 3 to 6 months, we've actually pressed the button to start drawing up projects and the funding put in place for over 60 small highway improvements, and that includes road safety, pedestrian crossings, vehicle activated signs across the county. And many of the town and parish councils are quite keen to join with us on those proposals and bring some of their neighbourhood funding to the table to let things happen in local communities. So it really has been a bottom-up approach supporting communities across the county, Leader. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we've given things a good airing. So again, unless Councillor David Minnery wishes to make any further comment.
Nothing more to add, Leader.
Yeah, I think we'll go to a decision. I'm just making sure I've got the recommendation in front of me, which are on page 2 of the separate report I've got. and there are 3 recommendations, which are pretty straightforward. So unless anybody makes any comment in the next few seconds, we'll accept the report and it will be adopted. So I'll give everybody a few seconds. Right, we agree then the capital strategy. Thank you very much. And then we move on next to the collection fund. Oh no, fees and charges is next. Back to David Minery. You're a busy chap today. Fees and charges.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think I've got 6 papers today, which is a bit like buses. You know, you never see one and then all of a sudden you get 6 at the same time. But the fees and charges one, this is the annual review. I will make a point at the start of this, Leader, that the purpose of this paper really is to get the financial strategy and the council tax papers all sorted out and everything agreed by council at the end of this month. And we need to be able to balance the books. We need to be able to review our charges, and we've long had a policy of putting them up sort of around the rate of inflation each year, and that's certainly the case for most of the figures. But I do want to draw attention to one aspect of it, which is the impact on our income from our charges of the pandemic and dealing with the pandemic, because as everybody will know, we've not been able to collect car parking charges. The leisure facilities have not been open. So looking at preparing a budget for next year, we have to take a view. And we have to apply the normal policy to uplift every year. But the fact remains that we know that the economy is not going to be in a position to deliver all of this income to us. So I think the general rule of this is this is what we're aiming for, this is what we're hoping for, this is what will go into the budget. But we know all too well that Cabinet will, as we go into the year, start to look at the car parking charges, may well decide not to implement that for a period, may decide to have lower figures, whatever is needed to get the economy going. But we can't prejudge that. We can't second guess what's going to happen. So we have to go with the normal approach to this, and that's what this paper represents. So with that little caveat, Leader, I'll move the recommendations which appear in paragraph 2, so it's 2.1 down to 2.4. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. I'm happy to second the report, and I do it on the same basis that you're saying. It's been a difficult year, and we aren't completely sure where everything is going. The pandemic isn't over yet. Hopefully, you know, things are looking up. The vaccination programme has been hugely successful, and hopefully that will allow things to get back to a sort of normal quite soon. You did talk about car parking charges, and I think we will have to assess things as we go forward to make sure we maintain our income. I'd rather see more cars parking in our towns and keep the prices as we can, but we've got to assess how we go over the next few weeks and see where we sit. But I think that will be subject to debate during the summer months, and we've got to see just how the economy goes. We're very, very keen to make sure our economy grows strongly once people are out of lockdown, and I think that will happen. I think the shops will get back to normal, and I think the visitor economy in Shropshire is going to be huge. People certainly say in the Black Country or areas like that, you know, we're all desperate to go away for a week or whatever and have a holiday. And if you live in some of the more urban areas, coming to Shropshire is a wonderful treat. And I think there will be a huge move to people to visit places like this. So I'm hoping we can achieve, certainly in our car parks, the same income without, you know, an increased income without having to put the charges up. But we'll need to assess that as we go forward. But I think the basis of this report is the right way to start, and then we'll assess things as we go forward. So I do think there's a lot of scope for change as we go forward. But I'm happy to second this report on the way it's presented. So thank you. So that's moved and seconded. Nobody seems to be indicating they wish to say anything, so I'll give everybody a few seconds, and then if nobody indicates differently, the recommendations will be accepted. Nobody's indicating, so those recommendations on page 2 of the report are accepted and will be taken forward. Now we move on to I have to look at all these different financial papers. The estimated collection fund outturn for 2021. David.
Yes, thank you, Leader. This is the annual report on what's happened with the collection fund. Just as a reminder to people who may not have sat through this before, the collection fund very simply is the big pot that we collect from the council tax and from the business rates. And that fund is then divided up in accordance with various regulations in terms of the business rates. Of course, 50% of it goes back to the government and so on. And the parish council precepts come out of the collection fund and all the rest of it. So this is the annual report that says what the surplus or deficit is expected to be this year. There is a large figure in there which is going to distort everybody's thinking and make some of the charts look a little bit odd, and that's all to do with the non-payment of business rates. And this is not non-payment because people are avoiding it. This is because of the pandemic, a number of businesses were given a council tax or business rate holiday. Nevertheless, when we set the figures last year, we were expecting to receive all of this money. So lo and behold, we've got an enormous deficit. Now, government have been really good and they've said they're going to cover that for us. But the way that it's accounted for will give rise to some peculiar looking figures within the accounts, somewhere around about 21 million deficit, which isn't a real deficit because the money's already come in, but it's just how we have to carry this stuff forward. So a little bit complicated. If we get really bogged down, I'll ask James to come in and provide further explanation. But I will move the recommendations now as they appear, which is 2.1 through to 2.6. Thank you.
Okay, I'll second that. And I'm just keeping quiet to see if anybody indicates to speak, but at the moment nobody's indicating. So if nobody indicates, I'll move to the recommendations. Right, nobody's indicated, so I'm assuming therefore the Cabinet accept the recommendations in this report. Right, thank you. So that's that one. I'm just trying to make sure I get to the next one. Treasury management update, Q3. Right, David.
Yes, thank you, Leader. This is the quarterly update. We have managed to get this one out. We couldn't make the full monitoring report, but this one is ready. So this is Q3 of the current financial year. The return being made is ever decreasing, as one might imagine, but nevertheless it's still outperforming the benchmark, as our officers always do. And that's amounted to an additional income of £145,850 during the quarter. And that's included in the outturn position on the monthly revenue monitor, and you will see it when we get the Q3 report coming through to Cabinet next month, I think it is. You'll note in paragraph 1.2 that the bank rate is still sitting at 0.1%, with the result that the 7-day benchmark rate is actually a negative figure and has been that way since the start of the financial year. So to achieve anything at all actually speaks of very good efforts on behalf of the officers, and I, as I normally do when I'm presenting this, take the opportunity to thank them and congratulate them on their sterling work, and also of course for our advisors, because if it wasn't for them also we might struggle. But there it is. It's just a matter of report, Leader, and I move it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll second that. And again, I would congratulate the staff on the work they do. They are unsung heroes. They work quietly in the background, but they do help our finances considerably. Again, I'm going to give everybody a few seconds to comment if they wish to. I can't see anybody indicating, so therefore we accept the recommendations, which is that the members accept the position as set out in the report. And we therefore move on to item 14, which is Treasury strategy. David, I think this
Yes,
is
thank you, Leader. We get to number 6, and thank goodness for that. So this is an annual treat, which is the review of our annual Treasury strategy and confirming that it will continue to operate for next year. The recommendations are shown on page 94. It is on my screen. A number of recommendations. Approving the Treasury strategy for 21-22, approving the prudential indicators, the investment strategy, the MRP policy, authorising the Section 151 officer to exercise borrowing powers, and to authorise the Section 151 officer to use other foreign banks which meet the necessary criteria as investment. And then there's a recommendation to the Audit Committee, which is G. And then it follows on 2.3 recommendations to Council, which are basically a repetition of the ones that I've just moved as far as Cabinet are concerned. So I won't say any more. I don't think it's necessary, Leader. As I say, it is what it is. It's the annual report. The Treasury strategy has been working well, as we've just seen in the previous item, and I'm sure will continue to work well. And I move the recommendations.
Okay, thank you, David. I'll second them. And again, I'll give everybody a few seconds if they wish to comment. If not, we'll go straight to the recommendations. There doesn't seem to be any comments, so those recommendations are accepted and they will go to Council. So item 15 is the updated vision for direct payments and new direct payments policy. Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you very much, Leader. It gives me great pleasure to be introducing this newly revised policy. Now, I'm sure when you got the papers pack, the reports pack for this Cabinet meeting, the first thing that all of you jumped down the agenda looking for was a new policy on direct payments in adult social care. And so I'm assuming in that case that you all know chapter and verse of the report and of the attached policy. But just in case you don't, I'll give it a little bit of an introduction. So legally, we're required to adopt a policy for direct payments as a local authority. And that's in common with all local authorities around the country. And if you look on the websites, because we all have to publish them on our websites, if you look on the websites and look at the policies of every local authority, they will look almost identical. They will all say the same things. They will all be laid out in the same format. And something else that they will all share, they will all have in common the fact that they are virtually unintelligible unless you've been involved in helping write them. So when it came time for us as a council to renew our direct payments policies, we wanted to be bold, we wanted to be ambitious, but actually what we wanted to do more than anything was we wanted to make it accessible for the people who actually matter, and that's the people who are in receipt of the direct payments. Those are the service users, those are the carers. And so we reached out using something, it's become one of my favourite words, although I'd never heard of it before I was given the portfolio for adult social care, and that is co-production. I've become a big fan of this whole concept of co-production. So we brought in not just the technical officers of the council, but we went out and brought in the service users, we brought in the carers, we brought in the advocacy groups, and everybody sat down, and this is pre-COVID lockdown, by the way, this started. Everybody sat down in a big room and we hammered out exactly what we wanted to achieve from the policy. Never mind what it said we legally had to put in there, actually how did we want our policy to reflect on Shropshire Council? And the result is the policy document that you see before you today. Now, it may strike you that this does not look like a local authority policy document. And if it does, then I applaud you for your observations and say thank you very much, because that was the intention the whole way along. And our officers, particularly Tanya, the director, Lorraine and Stuart, who spent so many hours working on this, and the service users, the carers, the experts by experience, as we call them, their advocate, who spent so many hours voluntarily to try and make this a good, approachable, readable, understandable policy. So my hat really goes off to all of them because they've done an absolutely first class job. So having said that, I will formally move the recommendations. There's only the one, that the attached policy is recommended for approval. And I will take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask Councillor Lee Chapman to second it. Lee understands it far better than I do. So Lee?
Yeah, happy to second that, Peter. And I'd just like, if I could, just to make a few comments on the work that's been done. I think it's a superb piece of work, real testament to the council officers' ability to leverage in that expertise from people who've got experience of what it's like receiving a direct payment, and having the board that oversaw the process actually co-chaired by someone who receives a direct payment completely demonstrates the equality that individuals are balanced against officers, and the ability for those people to contribute directly to policy that influence and governs the way that their well-being is looked after in the way that the council administers direct payments. So congratulations to Dean and to the director and all of the those people who put their valuable time towards this. So very pleased to second it.
Okay, thank you very much. The recommendation is on page 145 of the report I've got, and it's very simple. It is that the policy is recommended for approval. I think it's pretty straightforward, and to be fair, it is written in language that most of us can understand, because sometimes financial type reports can be difficult, but this is pretty straightforward. So again, I'm going to give everybody a few seconds to indicate if they want to speak or say anything, and if not, we're going to accept the recommendation. No, that seems to be pretty straightforward. So that recommendation is accepted, and we move on. There's one item left: Shropshire Schools Funding Formula 2021 to 2022. Councillor Ed Potter.
Thank you very much, Leader. This is the second paper that comes annually at this time of year. It is around setting the school finances for the forthcoming financial year. In July 2020, the Education and Skills Funding Agency published the 2021-2022 School Revenue Guide for Local Authorities and Schools Forums. Cabinet might remember back in January 2018, approved the recommendation from Shropshire Schools Forums to replicate the national funding formula through Shropshire's local funding formula, which means 2021-2022 will be the fourth year that the national funding formula will be applied to the funding of the county schools and academies. The recommendation is that Cabinet accepts the recommendations of Shropshire Schools Forum on the funding formula for Shropshire Schools for the financial year for maintained schools and the academic year for academies. There's quite a lot of detail in the Cabinet paper, which I'm sure colleagues have read, but some of the key points just to highlight. There's an increase of 3% overall in the key factors of the national funding formula, which means that schools which are already attracting their NFF allocations will attract a significant increase in both cash and real terms. On top of this, there's of this 3% uplift, there's a further £180 for primary pupils and £260 for secondary pupils has been added to the age-weighted pupil unit to reflect the rolling in of the teachers' pay and pension grants into the national funding formula, which was previously met through a separate grant. Another key point just to highlight is the maximum sparsity value will increase from 26,000 to 45,000 for primary schools and from 67,600 to 70,000 for secondary schools. This will increase the amount that the formula allocates nationally to remote schools through their sparsity factor to 42 million, an increase of over 60% in comparison to 2020-2021. I'd just like to take this opportunity to publicly thank our schools, our staff, all those who work in the school community for their dedication and hard work over the past, what is nearly 12 months now through COVID, in ensuring that our young people are well educated and kept safe throughout the county. It is clear to me, and this is something I mentioned at Schools Forum, that our school communities have gone above and beyond on many occasions to ensure we still maintain a high level of education for young people across Shropshire. And I just wanted to take this opportunity at Cabinet to publicly mention that and to convey that to all our school communities throughout the county. And I very much hope that Cabinet will approve the recommendation from Schools Forum as laid out. It's just one recommendation at item 2 in the paper. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll second that. And again, nobody's indicated a desire to speak, so I'll give you all a few seconds. Other than that, we'll confirm the recommendation. Nobody said anything, so therefore that recommendation is confirmed. I think that's the end of the meeting. Can I thank everyone? You've behaved impeccably, unlike some of the parish councils in Cheshire. We do generally behave pretty well at Shropshire compared with many places. So thank you all for everything you've done today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader. Goodbye.